On the line with us, Velshi, the host of MSNBC's Velshi, which Louise and I religiously watch every Saturday, Sunday morning on MSNBC. Velshi, Alivelshi on Twitter. Ali, welcome back to the program. There's been a lot of pearl clutching around Donald Trump having dinner with Nick Fuentes. I was ranting about this 2 hours ago at the beginning of the program. My op-ed today saying that this really isn't anything new in the Republican Party. No. It goes back to '64. You have thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, there's two parts to that. One is what you wrote about, that it's not new in the Republican Party. It's not new about Donald Trump, right? I mean, there's a 60-year plus history of Donald Trump and his father denying rentals to black people, talking about at one point, he doesn't really like black people as accountants. He just wants guys in yarmulkes. The Central Park Five, the coming down the elevator at Trump Tower, talking about black people or Hispanics as rapists, the Muslim ban, the stand by and stand back to the Proud Boys during the presidential debate, the good people on both sides. So the idea that anybody is surprised by any of this right now is amazing. The language Donald Trump used, he's not denounced Nick Fuentes, who is an avowed anti-Semite and Holocaust denier. In fact, Nick Fuentes and Kanye West are busy on InfoWars, on Alex Jones' show right now, talking about how Hitler's not such a bad guy, or he understands Hitler. Kanye said Nick Fuentes is still there. It's a whole lot of anti-Semitism. So all of this fits a pattern that no one should be surprised by. And if I were a mainstream Republican, or one who wasn't in Donald Trump's thrall, I would have no difficulty with condemning this. The problem is, being in Trump's thrall it causes you to make some very big judgment errors. And you would think that anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial and racism and white supremacy and all this kind of stuff would be the line you can't cross. That, sticking with that would be crossing the Rubicon, something from which you cannot return. And that's not the case. In fact, I was just looking at the most recent numbers we've got right now. PBS asked 57 Republicans for a response to Donald Trump and Nick Fuentes. 38 of them did not respond. They just had no response. One of the responses from John Cornyn of Texas. He told a reporter for Raw Story that he had better things to do. I don't know what the end of that sentence was. Better things to do than to condemn hate. I don't know, but it's a very weird situation. Some people are pearl clutching. Some Republicans are avoiding this entirely because it's too much. It's too far a bridge to cross to condemn the former president for having dinner with an anti-Semite Holocaust denier.
My concern about this is that it speaks to the power of racism in politics in the United States, and how that power has been intentionally used. I mean, Richard Nixon in 1964, when Lyndon Johnson famously told Bill Moyers after he signed the Civil Rights Act that he was concerned that he had just given away the South for a generation from the Democratic Party. That Nixon intentionally came in. He branded it. He called it a Southern strategy. There was a name for it. Let's pick up these white racists and bring them into the GOP. Ronald Reagan's first speech as an official candidate for president of the United States was at the Nebosha, I'm mispronouncing that, county fair outside of Philadelphia, Mississippi, a little town of a couple thousand people. That's only famous for one thing. It's where Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, the three civil rights workers, were murdered, and they made the movie Mississippi Burning out of it. Yep. And that was where Reagan gave his first official speech to kick off his campaign for the presidency in 1980. And the entire speech to a white-only audience was about states' rights. It's not like this stuff has been hidden if you're a Republican. The Republicans know what's going on, but it's like the media in this country and I guess a lot of Democrats are suddenly, oh my God, there's racism in the GOP? In a way, I think it might even be a good thing that Donald Trump has just said, to hell with it, I'm just going to be who I am. Because now we're having these kind of conversations that, frankly, we should have been having in 1970.
Right. So this is the thing he's always done, right? He said the quiet part out loud. What happened from, the time before Reagan, although it appeared again in the 80s a lot, was that we had code words for these kinds of things, but the Republicans had learned at least to use code words for them. And what Donald Trump is doing is offering a whole lot of Republicans the excuse to not have to use code words, to actually understand that there's a base that needs supporting, and Nick Fuentes and others like him do energize that base. And hey, they're not going anywhere else. They're not going to the Democrats. The only danger of alienating the base is that they sit home and don't vote because they don't think Republicans are representing them or their identity needs. So to some degree, I don't understand how this political strategy succeeds going forward, because there are, as we saw in the midterm elections, there are just enough people who otherwise would be Republicans or conservatives who are alienated in many cases by anti-democratic movements that Donald Trump represents, for which he's not been held to account, and some of this stuff, and cutting back on abortion rights. So I wonder whether this is a winning strategy. You'll recall, you and I have talked about this, that while a lot of people thought the collapse of Roe v. Wade was a victory for Republicans, very few suggested that this become codified in law. Lindsey Graham tried that, and it went absolutely nowhere, because a whole lot of Republicans said, this is actually a bridge too far for us. This is too much. This is going to lose us popular support. So I don't know that it's going to work for Republicans much going forward. It works for the base, and no one understands that base better than Donald Trump does, which is why he used the same excuse for meeting with Nick Fuentes as he used when he met with David, or when David Duke endorsed him in 2016 when he was running for president. He went on CNN, talked to Jake Tapper, and said, I don't know David Duke. I don't know what he said. Did he endorse me? Did he support me? I don't know if he supported me. A lot of people support me. I don't have anything to do with that. That's what he said. There's one easy answer. When you find out that you inadvertently, if it was inadvertent, and I'm not sure it was, I don't understand how Donald Trump wouldn't know who Nick Fuentes was, or whomever made that appointment with him, or whoever invited Kanye West didn't say, by the way, he's with Nick Fuentes. We just did a Google search, and this guy's a anti-Semite Holocaust denier. But even if all of that was true, even if Donald Trump didn't know who he was or didn't know who David Duke was, it's really easy to disavow a racist. That is remarkably low-hanging fruit, to say, even to not even disavow all racists, but to say, oh, this guy's a bit of a kook. And that can't even be done. And the fact that you and I are having this conversation is kind of remarkable, that today's Republican Party cannot come out with a unified view about the fact that a presidential candidate or anybody in their party representing their party should not be dining with, having conversations with, unless it's an organized debate against a Holocaust denier and an anti-Semite. That is not happening. And to top it all off, Tom, the pillow guy, the foam pillow guy, wants to be the head of the Republican Party. So this problem is not solving itself anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Which raises an interesting question, which is what's next for the GOP. I mean, the Republican Party, after they purged themselves in 1920 with the election in 1920 was when the party basically officially repudiated Teddy Roosevelt and his successor. And instead just became the party of big business. I mean, Harding's campaign slogans, his two campaign slogans, the first was a return to normalcy, which meant drop the 91% tax rate down to 25%, which he did. And the second was more business in government, less government in business, which meant deregulate and privatize. And he did those things, and that kicked off the Roaring '20s, which then led straight to the Republican Great Depression, which is what it was called up until the 1940s. So the Republican Party, for over a century now, for a century and 2 years, has officially been the party of rich guys in big business. But Nixon figured out in '64 that that's not enough to get you elected. So you pick up these marginal votes, and in this case, it was like the entire South. I mean, it was just sitting there waiting for them because LBJ had turned his back on them. So they've been coasting now for 50 years, basically, still being the party of rich guys in big business, but selling themselves as the party of, the white guy, basically, the blue-collar white guy. Wink, wink, right?
And they struggled with it a little bit, right? Certainly in the unionization movement, because the unionization is not exclusively Democrat. There are a lot of people who support Donald Trump, particularly in some of these unions like police. They've struggled with it for a while, but they have not for a long time been able to say the quiet part out loud. And so I think there's relief on the part of some Republicans who will not condemn Donald Trump for this, that, all right, he's saying it. I don't have to get too close to him, but I will not condemn the idea that Donald Trump either didn't know or had dinner with these guys. And remember, your point that you've made since Richard Nixon in '64, it applies to abortion, too. Abortion was not a mainstream Republican issue. It just wasn't.
Right. Until 1980.
And they adopted it mostly into Reagan's time, but starting from 73 onward, they adopted it because, once again, they saw it as a marginal opportunity to get votes, and it became central to their operation. The Republican Party of 50 years ago did not have abortion or restrictions on abortion as central to its
Reagan
mission.
signed the most liberal abortion law in America as governor of California.
Right.
So
this is the danger. When you go for these marginal votes, if you don't know what you're getting into, the unintended consequences are you become that.
Well,
I mean,
and that's
notion that the Republican Party was a party of rich white guys. I'd have taken that today, because that can be debated. You can have those kinds of debates. They don't become a weirdly ideological thing like these things do. How are we debating whether or not what the right thing to do is about anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial? Why are we debating what the right thing to do is with a woman's autonomy over her body? I'm still one of those guys, an economics guy. I'm happy to debate tax rates with you and minimum wage and how health care should be paid for. We've gone into this other territory, this culture war that Republicans continue to accuse Democrats of fueling. It's a Republican thing. This is the culture war.
Well, we have about 50 seconds till we hit a hard break here. So my question is, as the number of white people in society diminishes, and therefore the base, that Republican base that they built in '64, starts to vanish, what do they do next?
Yeah, that is actually, I've got it on my whiteboard here as a conversation that I'm going to be having on my show this weekend. What do they do next? And I hope it's something, because it is not a healthy country to have one political party entirely disappear. But this is a dysfunctional political party. And even conservatives and Republicans with whom I speak, who do not share any of these ridiculous views, are not hopeful that this party is going to fix itself anytime soon. It might be two or three presidential cycles before there's a viable and real Republican Party in which a candidate can debate with a Democratic candidate and a voter has an actual choice between two parties. But
I think you're absolutely right. The great Ali Velshi. Ali Velshi, thanks so much for dropping by. Great talking with you.
My pleasure, sir.
Great. And check out Ali's programs on MSNBC on Saturday and Sunday mornings. Some great reporting, great commentary, great guests. The very best the network has to offer.